It's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who's Bendert De Graff. So Bendert is joining us from the Netherlands. He's the chairman of the board of the Dutch Bardet Biedl Syndrome Foundation. Bendert is the father of a son with Bardet Biedl type 1 syndrome, and he's the chair of the Dutch BBS Foundation. He has a PhD in molecular and medical genetics that he obtained at the Oregon Health and Sciences University in the USA. And in his day job, I hope I got this right, Bender, he's a chief operating officer of a lab with 2 locations of around 80 employees, working on import-export of dairy food products all over the world. He's also involved very much in the BBS international community, and he participates in several big EU-funded and smaller projects. And he plays an active role in the Emma Centre for Personalised Medicine, and that's an expert centre in Amsterdam that focuses on patients and families with rare hereditary conditions. So, Bendert, we're very excited to hear your talk today and find out more about your Project Predict program. Thanks.
If anybody has any questions, just ask them. I don't know if I see all the hands, but just stop me. That's fine. So yeah, I was mentioned in the introduction, I'm a dad of a son named Jake. He just turned 10 years old. He has indeed Bardet Biedl. For those that I assume a lot of people are now really familiar with ciliopathies and cilia. We just got a nice introduction. Bardet Biedl also has a role in that with the transport on the cilia. Let's see if I can make my marker. That should be possible. Then people can see my marker. There's a big BBSome, it's called, where BBS is involved with the transfer along these cilia. There's a lot of genes in Bardet Biedl. Now there's like 26 genes have been identified. I believe it's even more now. That goes really fast currently with all the new technology. I don't want to go too much into detail, but as mentioned in the introduction, there's a lot of overlapping or similar things we see at people that have these ciliopathies. For Bardet Biedl, the biggest things are renal degeneration, obesity, extra fingers, other abnormalities. But those are, in my experience, the biggest things. And then there's, of course, learning disabilities and some other problems that you see at a much smaller group of people. But I think it would be nice to really tell my story a little bit of where we were, where I come from, besides that I have a PhD, but how I ended up now in this webinar in a matter of 5 or 6 years. I met my wife at a relatively old age, and we decided, okay, this is it. Let's start with kids. My wife is educated, graduated nurse for people with disabilities, and I have a PhD in rare diseases. For us, the pregnancy was pretty normal. No abnormalities, no warnings, of course, no family history. Jake was born 10 years ago. He was born by C-section, and in the operating room they told me, oh my God, he looks perfect, but he has extra fingers. Well, I put in the picture, this is actually his hand. This is the, I would say the prettiest finger. The other one was a little bit more wormish, but this looks like a finger. He couldn't move it. It was just a immobile kind of finger. So in the operating room, as I was educated in rare diseases, I asked the first question to the doctors in the operating room, okay, does he have a syndrome? And they told me, don't worry about it. We see this very often. And what we do is just we operate it, and it's okay then, don't worry about it. So at the time I was like, okay, maybe I'm already worried that, maybe I'm not. You don't want anything to be wrong with your kids, so and we kind of ignored it and operated them at a relatively young age, because it's rather big. So when they start to crawl or with clothing, it's all difficult and painful. So we were relatively early, also so he couldn't remember. I assume nobody can read Dutch here, but on his T-shirt it says, "I will not be alone," in a short time. And what meant we sent this picture to the grandparents, and everybody started cheering, of course. And my wife was pregnant again of a baby girl. At the 21 ultrasound, it didn't look good. The kidneys were almost not working, all kinds of problems with her clubbed feet. Yeah, the extra fingers we saw it. You can see it on this picture, but yeah, a very difficult decision to stop the pregnancy at the time, because the doctor said she will not survive birth because we think it's Merkel-Gruber syndrome, which is something it's sometimes confused with. So she won't be viable or survive the birth, and she needed a transplantation immediately and operations on both feet. We didn't want to have that much pain, so we decided to do this. Of course, we got the difficult question then to if we wanted to know what was going on. I have 3 younger brothers. They were also busy with kids at the time. Difficult question to answer then is, okay, are you going to do you want to know what's going on? In the Netherlands, the healthcare is pretty okay. So we do, at the time, next generation sequencing pretty fast. But the disadvantage is if they find something else in the Netherlands, and they can identify what disease or syndrome it is. And if they find anything else that's treatable for me or for my wife, they will inform you as well. And that made it really hard for us to make a decision to do this testing, because ignorance is bliss, I always say. And if you then also get, okay, we found this with your daughter, and by the way, you also have this to worry about. But in the end, we did decide to do it after much of debate. It took about a year for us to really come to that decision. It came back that I was carrier, my wife was of course carrier, different mutations for people that are familiar with it. The mutation that this one is the most common BBS1 mutation. And yeah, she carried both the mutations, of course. So we got this information from our clinical geneticist, but we were actually in the waiting room with Jake, our oldest son, and we were just chatting, my wife and I, like, oh, he's having difficulty speaking, which is one of the symptoms of Bardet Biedl, only making the AAOE sounds. He sounded really like that as a baby. He couldn't say papa or mama, or that's how we say it in the Netherlands. And we were just discussing it, and she walked by getting coffee or whatever. And then when we had the meeting, she said, well, I looked quickly in your electronic patient file, which we have in the Netherlands. He was born with extra fingers. We need to test him. Now, another interesting part, and that's why I started this foundation, is that there was at the time, and this is 2014, 15, I think. 2015, I think. They didn't. There was nothing in the Netherlands. So what I received from our clinic geneticist, she knew I was a scientist. She gave me like 10 or 20 papers about Bardet Biedl to read. But there was nothing for parents, there was nothing, basically. But in the meantime, while we got the result, we always dreamt about 3 kids. My wife was pregnant of our youngest son, Dylan, and they kind of look alike. So we were worried during the pregnancy, of course, already. So she had to do more checkups. But when he was born, well, I think you can see these are brothers. But he was born without extra fingers. So we did also check the results of the guys, which is allowed in the Netherlands. And of course, Jake came back as BBS1 mutation on both genes, and Dylan no carrier at all. So a relief, but also it was that stamp, here we go. We kind of knew something was going on, but yeah, you don't want to hear it as a parent. You don't want to hear something is wrong. And what happened, I stopped being a scientist. I don't work in the academic field anymore, as was mentioned in the intro. But my genes for a scientist turned on. I started to really get on the NCBI and read papers, try to understand what's going on, really being like, I want to change this. This is unacceptable for my kid, but also what I'm just getting on information now. And my wife was really interested to go, what does it mean for us in 10, 20, 30 years in his future development. So more how we were trained. And that's why we started the foundation, because there was nothing known. So one of the things you then start to do as a parent when you have a rare disease, jump on the internet, and what do you find? Hey, USA, hey, UK. No, that's it. So I started to email the BBS UK, which is not unfamiliar in this group, but also BBS USA. Very nice people that responded. Contacted many doctors in the Netherlands, and we just we said we need to do this because there is nothing. There's no information, no website for Dutch people. There's no contact group. So we started to do that. Of course, at first we wanted to get it better in the Netherlands and maybe dream about even going global by collaborating. And going global, that's things that were mentioned a little bit in the questions earlier. I also, in the other presentation, I also believe it's very important to work together. When you dive into the world of rare diseases, there's a lot of fragmentation. There's also, of course, parents like me that really want something resolved for their kid right now. And once you figure out that's not really possible often, and then you need to wake up or surrender. But we wanted to fight and connect the world of BBS first, but also look at what was raised as a question. Okay, there are similar-ish in the same ciliopathies syndromes. Maybe there's something more we can do on that level as well. But this started for us like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, really to make momentum. It was not well organized in the Netherlands, so that was my first focus. And we did that by connecting patients, but also the experts here in the Netherlands. And now I'm really trying to connect them with outside the Netherlands by just asking. We started a database now in the Netherlands. There's ERN networks in Europe. That was mentioned in the previous presentation as well. There's a ciliopathy ERN. I have mixed feelings about it, to be honest, because it's very focused often on either just the kidneys or just the eyes, and for Bardet Biedl there's much more going on. But what's very important to be able, I think, to exchange data in the future with each other is that we, for these rare diseases, especially in the ciliopathy, we need to work with the standard. And UK is working on the red cap standard, the Netherlands now too. We had a meeting with the USA to do that. And I think in these ERN networks, if it's not the case, we should do that, because then data becomes exchangeable with unique identifiers. Of course, people talk about GDPR. It's all doable. It's a lot of work, but it's doable. But we need to standardize at the basis, and that's something that's not everywhere what I see. And to be able, just to go into that question a little bit, I think that's the first step, that we need to agree on how, on the basis level, we are going to do this, to then compare also the different syndromes in the ciliopathies, to be able to say something smart or do something smart about that, because otherwise we're comparing potentially apples with oranges. That's the first thing. So we are doing a RedCap database here. It started now. We do it indeed for the under the hood of the MS Center. The MS Center is how to say it, really focused thing now in Europe. I believe the first one in Europe that's going to do this is focus on rare diseases and really bridge between science and applications that really help the patient. What do I mean by that? They have a whole approach by that. They really want to focus on that last step. What you often see is that there's many good research going on. I think ciliopathies and everything, it's really an exciting scientific world developing. But very often you see then when the science is figured out or people agree that this is it, then there's no solutions. And what do we want as parents? And I think people with Bardet Biedl and other rare syndromes, solutions. And this is the gap they try to jump into, which I'm then also involved in. I will be in the advisory board of this center. Bardet Biedl is picked as one of the example syndromes to actually set this all up so it becomes common practice for rare diseases in Europe. This is all in Dutch up here, Dutch English, but it's certain steps they go through to really come towards solutions for patients to get the real help they need. And why? That's often my story, of course, in the Netherlands, but it's probably the same in other countries. And especially when you have a rare disease, you see 10, maybe 20 experts, super expensive to do that. And what we want to do with this is get the right expert with the right treatment, not unnecessary experts, but also have them put together in the same room so they can exchange data and have that all in a specific database, which is standardized, hopefully worldwide one day. So we can choose to share data to really get smart, because if we go global, if for Bardet Biedl, we're talking about 200,000 people, which is a wealth of information that can be used better. And I'm sure for other rare syndromes, similar things can be accomplished by that. So what do we need then, of course, and then I'm slowly moving towards predict, is of course funding for projects, sponsors maybe even, to organize things like the Cilia 2024. I'm also involved in that organizing committee. But we need to help raise awareness, not just only for Bardet Biedl, but rare disease in general. There's one in February, of course, today, but yeah, there's much more we can also do when we talk about ciliopathies, but also rare diseases in general, to just make noise that there are a lot of people and also the families around it that are affected by something that we label as rare. Well, if you look at it, the big thing, one could debate, is it rare? But I think it's also important then to find future doctors and scientists, and it's something working on here in the Netherlands, that my fear is that when a doctor retires, everything collapses, and you need to also have longevity in that, so like a growth path. So that's also embedded in the MS Center, where I also give lessons on school from my point of view. Are there already questions about this this part? Maybe interesting for some, maybe a little bit less for others, but I think it's important, so when people see me in the future, oh, that's that guy. I thought it would be nice to explain it a little bit and what we're doing in the Netherlands. There's no questions? No. Then I'll move on. Okay, then I assume there's no questions. I hope everybody's still following what I'm talking about. The Predict project, yeah, that's one of those big European projects. I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty details, really, because one, I don't feel comfortable with it anymore, and two, I really want to present this from a patient perspective or a foundation perspective, why I think it is important to try and support science on these kinds of novel ideas, very fundamental research to understand the future when it comes to ciliopathies. The objectives of the move my thing away. The objectives are basically mentioned here. It's the idea is to get a certain tool to really predict again what can we expect in the future for this person having this rare disease. What kind of symptoms will he or she develop and when and how, and of course then how can we prevent it, or how can we delay it, and maybe even long term, how can we cure it? So those are the kind of things we're trying to do in this project. It's a very, very big project, which we have outlined in several work packages. I'm mostly involved in work package 5. That means tell people about that we're doing this project, but also in the future try to get engagement of the people that we do this research for. Basically commercialize it a little bit of what is going on here, because I think it could be a very interesting approach, because every work package has its people in it, special focus. So the work package 1, they really want to understand, and that's why these databases are very important to make, or registries we call them, and I think that's why it's also important to standardize it, that you can correlate the genetics with, they call it phenotypes, probably something you've heard in these meetings before, but the characteristics. And if in one country we don't follow the kidneys, but in the others we do, you'll make the data not correct. And those are things I think I'm really pressuring now of standardization, not only for Bardet Biedl, but maybe even for more. And that's something it's not easy to do, because you need a lot of people willing to do that. But once you know that, you can also make potentially models, either by using bioinformatics or artificial intelligence these days, databases that are already available, but also making model systems to predict what's coming out there. So you see in your real patient data what's going on, and can you replicate it basically in the models that you have, either computer models or real cellular models. And that's what we're trying to do in this project, to go from really data that's available and data that's available in registries, but also look at cellular levels, like we saw the nice pictures in the previous presentation with all the nice colors and things like that in it. Can we then make it on a cellular level, and what do we see there? And then also go towards a model system that's often very used, zebrafish. It's a very easy to use model system to try and replicate certain things you have tried in your dish, and then see what kind of effects you see, and what kind of if it actually confirms what you see in our case in work package 2 and in work package 3. That's the whole idea behind it. And of course, we all hope we see some nice things, and then new that gives us guidance to where to focus on in maybe future projects. So this project is rather big. A lot of money is involved, but why would you go in this? And that's of course a question I get from parents, like, it's not going to help me now. Yeah, I'm trying as a foundation really focus also on a lot of things on the now, and it's the healthcare and things going on in the Netherlands, like getting assistant dog if possible, or those kind of things need to be organized. But I think also I like to also focus on the longer term, because more people like me will follow. So really want to pave the way for future generations to also, so it doesn't stop if I stop, and it doesn't stop with just having a guidance dog. I really want real changes. So that's a little bit that scientist in me, that wants to make the big changes for future generations to come, to get medicine, to get treatment, and maybe even cure certain things in the far future with all the gene therapy people have heard about and things like that. And I think that's important to support, if you can, as a patient organization. Initiatives like this, I think it's also good to be in the dissemination, because I used to be a scientist, well, I'm still a scientist, but scientists focus on the science and forget often the world outside. That's just how they are. That's how I used to be. But there's much more out there. And I think as a patient organization, being involved in that, it can really, you can really make a difference about this. Yeah, the time scale for this project is about 3 years. We started a little bit late, so I don't have it really sharp on when we end this. We just started, so I don't have a lot of things to show yet. They did the first computer data analysis on what they found on the internet and on databases. There are already some identifiers, but it's also difficult because there they already ran into the problem, which patient is in what database. Is it are there multiple people in several databases? I know for sure that's the case. And that really confuses the data already a little bit. So there was already a little bit of a talk about, okay, how we're going to solve this. So it's a long project of more than €1 million, with many groups involved. I believe I put that in as well. Let's see. Here you go. So these are all the groups that are involved in this big project, where I'm then also got a little bit of funding to go to conferences and things like that to talk about this project or other things that are associated with this project. So I think it's an interesting project to for the people here to just keep following. What we need to set up still is a little bit of communication. So maybe we will set up an email database. You can sign up and get once in half a year or a year an update or even an invite to online seminars that will happen in the future and even live. We're looking into maybe talk about this a little bit at the Cilia meeting next year, but it depends on the acceptance, but also the progress, of course. So I think that's an interesting thing to follow. Are there already questions about this other than the time, the duration of the project? No? No.
Thanks.
Maybe one more thing I'd like to address.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Of course, I always looked very jealous at how things are organized in the UK, a few years ahead of our time. But last Saturday we had our first ciliopathy meeting in the Netherlands, where we actually want to do similar things as in the UK, but really focused on the Netherlands situation, where we also want to have all the ciliopathies have a stage at this network. So we had the first one ever. Pretty okay. I think attendance, not everybody's in the picture, but most people that were present there were in the picture. Were present. You can see a little bit of the agenda. It was a lot of science, of course. I also gave a little bit of a talk, similar-ish to this talk. I think it was very interesting, and I also want to talk, of course, to Fiona and others to see if we can align what we're doing in the Ciliopathy Alliance in the Netherlands with that in the UK, so we can also make that on that level more of a network. And we're doing it especially with this lady here and him is Ronald Roepman. He's a very, I wouldn't say famous, but well-known ciliopathy researcher, and she is a ciliopathy doctor, seeing patients, but also doing research. They really want to, and I know them very well, want to spearhead this forward. So I think that's also interesting to keep in mind towards the future. Was it, yeah, good question, Helen. To me, it was this time a little bit aimed towards the science and the scientists, but it's something I already mentioned that if they want patients to be more involved, that needs to change. So, but I think it was, you can see it at the agenda, it was very scientific-y. But I think it's a good first start. Somebody started it, these two people, just because people were talking about it, never happened. So I hope on that level, with the people here, we can also find each other in the future and collaborate on that or exchange data or whatever. But I think it's positive as well, because then we can connect. The Bardet Biedl world is connected, but maybe other syndromes can find each other too. I know for Schubert, it's difficult, there's fewer patients, and they don't have a lot of international connection yet, but this could be a way to also facilitate that